Hello.
How is life?
Better. How are you?
Good, good. How is your shoulder? How is everything?
Overall, everything is good. Shoulder is better. I'll do another X-ray in another month.
Okay.
I don't have any of the, I forgot the name, but the support anymore, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So that's good. Progress, the doctor said.
Okay. Well, that's good news, I guess.
It is.
All right.
Slow, but in the right direction. I'll take it.
Nice. That's good news. Yeah, here everything is fine. I don't have any exciting news other than that I was digging holes in the in my garden for the last days because well, it's a long story, but sometimes you just have to dig holes.
Okay, well, I don't think you can leave it at that because otherwise it sounds like you literally buried a body, but
No.
up to you.
Oh yeah. Oh, my alibi is that a guy came over to build a sort of wood shed or wood storage, and
Yeah.
we needed to dig holes to, put some concrete in it, and then on top of that we could build this whole thing.
Yes, because if you don't put a layer of concrete, the body is easier to find. I understand.
Oh shit! Yeah, that wasn't the best. I shouldn't have mentioned the concrete because yeah, you're right.
Well, it's not recorded, I think, so I guess it's okay.
Actually, I did press the record button, so
Oh, well,
it's on record.
very nice. What's the location of the place we should not be go digging?
Yeah, I will leave that in the chat in the notes.
Okay, cool.
Oh, talking about notes, could you maybe paste the notes of the last email in the chat? Because then we have the agenda for today.
Sure. Yes, I have it open actually. So with a 3.2, but a unique numbering system, as you said.
Yeah, that was Gmail fighting, me fighting with the Gmail autocomplete.
The AI goes to shit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, great.
Without numbers. So
Yeah,
easier.
without numbers. But I see a lot of links, so maybe you could sort of kick off talking
Yes.
about links.
So happy to do that. It's a little bit of a counterweight to this. I don't know if the webcam works, but the Vision Pro, basically. I've
Okay.
been tinkering with it at work. It's a great hardware. It's a great ecosystem integration, but of course everything is locked down. Like that's the Apple way.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily for us both, WebXR works. So we have an escape hatch,
Mm-hmm.
and I was literally able to take my WebXR code for an immersive, load it on Safari, and it worked. No modification whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
So that was good news. The bad news being, for example, AR doesn't work in Safari. You can only do completely immersive.
Okay.
So, and some of the cool stuff like eye tracking, for example, is not yet supported, might not ever be actually. So basically, to me, the Apple Vision Pro is basically like a glorified, less accessible version of the Quest 3.
Mm-hmm.
So it looks super cool, but what we can actually build, it's actually less good than a Quest 3, ironically enough.
Aha.
So yeah, I have it, I play with it, but which brought me back to the Lynx,
Uh-huh.
which I received a little while ago. And why do I mention all this is because my experience was the opposite, namely that I loaded the WebXR page on the Lynx, and it did not work. And I was like, shit, the whole point of WebXR is that you take the same URL, different device, and if it's done, let's say, it just works.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem with this was the Lynx does not support or it does support tracking in the operating system, but not in the browser. The browser here meaning Wolvic, which is a fork of Firefox Reality. So for a little bit of tracking, Firefox developed initially, okay, that's going to take a little bit of backtracking. There was no standalone VR. There was just desktop VR. And the headsets that were only supported on Windows. So basically what Firefox or Mozilla did is support Firefox on Windows on desktop and support only VR. So there was a build of Firefox for Windows for desktop VR, which worked. I used the Oculus, for example, or the Vive, the HTC Vive with my experiences, and it worked really well. It's actually how I started working in VR for money. But then standalone happened, and people were like, "Whoa, I don't need a whole desktop. Whoa, I don't need to set up base stations. I don't need all this thing." Yes, it looks like shit. It's not pretty. In terms of performance, it's not PC VR, but at least I can use it casually, basically. And those standalone headsets are all running Android, or were at least until the Vision Pro, basically, all running Android. So it meant that Firefox, or Mozilla rather, started to do a Firefox build called Firefox Reality for Android. Because there was already a Firefox on Android. But basically, gradually, they gave up on Firefox on desktop for WebXR. There was little... It might still work today, to be honest. I did not try because I don't use Windows much or at all. Yeah, it's not big effort. But anyway, Firefox or Mozilla fired everyone working WebXR except the Hubs team a couple of years ago. Now they also fired the Hubs team 1 month ago. So there is nobody at Mozilla working on WebXR or XR anymore. So that's not a great sign. But the Wolvic browser, the fork of Firefox Reality, still exists and is maintained by Galia, which is an open source consulting company that different company, including Lynx, are paying to maintain that fork. And they are also switching now from Firefox Reality to the Gecko engine made by Mozilla to the Chromium engine made by Google, because I imagine they estimate that it's the most active or supported browser engine for WebXR.
Okay, so no servo.
So Servo, as far as I know, has been it doesn't exist anymore. It's being basically merged back to Firefox main.
Oh, really?
Yes, I think so. I think they called the project like Firefox Quantum, and that was basically the merging of not all of Servo actually, but part of Servo within Firefox. I think that was the transition maybe
Okay.
3-4 years ago.
Yeah, so sorry, I'm distracting your story. Go ahead.
No, I know who is. And so basically, I built Wolvic for the Lynx because the old version 1.5 for the Lynx, it ships with it, but it's an old one and it did not support their kind of fake hand tracking. So hand tracking on the Lynx is it is hand tracking done by the operating system, but instead of giving hands as a series of joints on how the fingers move, they give you a controller. So the browser or the web page, the WebXR page, it believes, let's say, that you have controllers, but it's not true. That's the trick.
So if I understand correctly, the hand tracking is working. However, just probably because they were in a hurry, they basically created an adapter for So that it acts as a hand control or as a controller
Yes.
in
Yes.
WebXR. Okay.
Exactly. They are working on the hand tracking proper, but that's going to still take a little bit more work, so it's not available yet. And the problem was, I don't know why, to be honest. I think it's money, basically, but I think Lynx did not pay yet Igalia for Lynx build. Or it's work in progress, but there was another deadline. I'm not sure, to be honest. This is just my own speculation. But basically, that if you go on the Wolvic repository, you don't find builds for Lynx except very old ones. So I had to do it myself. And it's not the end of the world, but yeah.
Oh, you're so optimistic.
No, well, I'm optimistic because I managed. So
It
I've
worked.
done
Oh,
it.
that's really
Yes,
good
it worked.
news. That's great news. Wow.
Yes. It because initially, yes, I was not very optimistic. It's true, but sorry, little emergency.
No problem.
I was, well, I mean, you see repository online, they give instruction on how to build it. Naively, you think, okay, I'll follow the instruction, it should work. But sometimes when there are lots of components, it's a little bit scary. And also, if like cross-platform, you build on AMD 64, but the target is ARM 64, it's for Android, etc. It becomes a little bit riskier, let's say. Sometimes they're reproducible builds, but yeah. Anyway, when you're not super familiar with the project, it's a little bit scary. Still naively laugh, I tried. It obviously did not work. I received a little bit of help on Discord and on the GitHub issues. And after building Gecko, which is like 20 gigabytes of code,
Whoa.
it's a big project because you have the JavaScript engine, Spider Monkey, and a couple of like the CSS also engine. I think is big, but yeah, it's a real browser, so it's a real big thing.
Wow.
So that took a little bit, but actually not too much. I have a good desktop, so I think I forgot, but less than an hour even that was built, so that was good. Maybe also the Android build is smaller. I'm not sure. And then building Wolvic to import Gecko in it. And then last little trick I had to do is my Lynx back then was not rooted, and Wolvic was already installed, so I couldn't remove Wolvic and install a new Wolvic. So I had to, in Android Studio, refactor the whole project in order to have a new application ID so that it wouldn't clash with the installed one. Which I'm not an Android developer, as you know, so I had no idea what I was doing. Basically following tutorial and clicking in places that looked about right. That did not work. I tried again on another machine actually, and it did work. So yeah, I ended up having a build, tried it on my device, and now when I shake my physical hands, I have virtual controllers in my WebXR pages, which I did have to adapt because normally I use only hand tracking, not controllers. So sadly for now, I mean, it's not sad, it's just annoyingly for now rather. For example, my interactions don't work because I expect pinch, for example. But I think adapting it for a controller click should not be a big deal. So I will eventually consider this. Sorry, I need to backtrack from the very beginning. Why having a Lynx in the first place? Because Lynx is not Meta, is not Apple, is not Google. They just do the headset. They just sell the headset. They were based up. And they also allow rooting. So I rooted, that was like the point 2 for today. That I spent a little bit of time after building it, and I thought, okay, now that I've done some progress on that headset, I can try to do more, and I started to try to root it. Took me like an hour or so, struggled a little bit because I've only done once in the past, like to root, I think, the Oculus Go. And I thought, okay, now I need to try because I want to do more. For example, remove the old Wolvic or install npm packages globally or whatever, like stuff that need to be root on the device. So yeah, all this amount of trouble for the Lynx is because it's a headset that we can properly tinker with, again, as opposed to the very convenient and cheap MetaQuest or the very expensive, very beautiful, but still completely locked down Apple Vision Pro. So it is quite a journey to get there. In my opinion, it's worthwhile because, for example, when we think of boot to web, you start the HMD and like right there, you end up on XRSH or a page where you're able to manage your WebXR content, skipping the entire rest. Like the shell can generally be on the web. I think it's through this kind of headset, not through Vision Pro. And all this to say, in terms of having a end-to-end experience that's coherent with, I would argue, the goal of institution like NLNet, I think that's the right kind of hardware. Well, sorry, that's a little bit convoluted.
I think that's really a good point. I also remember, and maybe we should suggest this, that they normally they only finance software, because most hardware is closed down, not open. But there are cases that they also basically fund a hardware device to sort of develop with. And so maybe this is something we, because you already have one, maybe we could, I don't know if there are various versions, but maybe we could get an extra one, because I do agree, like if you really extrapolate on the, well, I wouldn't say promise of WebXR, but the potential is that with a device like a Lynx, you could sort of boot into WebXR by some instructions to root it, and then maybe to set up some Wolvic auto start or something, which points to a page. That would be pretty cool, and also perhaps very convenient for organizations, schools, etc. Because the Quest 3 is great, and of course the Vision Pro, they are great at certain things, but there's this whole sort of starting point that you start with logging into their ecosystem, their app store, and it's not really plug and play if you have a custom use case.
It's worse than not being plug and play. It's like they still though do sell what's this name, MDM, like managed device, but which sounds like a good solution. But if you talk to professionals that use managed device, like on the Meta Quest, they hate it, which is not a good sign. And I bet that some of the instruction for those kind of managed device, they need a connection because you need to go through Meta servers and whatnot. So I think there might still be a way, but it's ways that still leave sovereignty and tinkerable to the manufacturers, not to actually us as users. So not necessarily impossible, but it's a little bit, I'm against this kind of thing in the sense that it's usually fighting upstream, like, or streaming upstream rather. It's like those kind of company might allow it somehow, but it's so against their culture or DNA or business model that it's a little bit also, it's not going the right way. I much rather, this took me a lot of work. I'm happy that I've done it because I learned in the process, but and because it's something I would use to other device, for example. But it's work that I know it's going to be like Lynx is aligned with this kind of thing because they just sell the hardware. so of supporting this kind of device that their own competitive advantage is the tinkerability, whereas Apple data, their competitive advantage is like turnkey solutions, turnkey for people or for users that are not ours. So I think, yeah. Anyway, another solution, just briefly mentioning, is there is an American company called Simula that do Linux proper, not Android headset. I don't know though in terms of browser support how that would work. Like I don't support WebXR basically, and they, unlike Lynx, I don't think they're going to fund a project like Igalia or co-fund because other people are doing it. Yeah, Simula is another kind of headset. It's not made in Europe. I think they have WebXR support funding at least planned, but that could be a solution.
Yeah. Well, it's really good to see that normal people can make headsets besides big corporations. That's really cool to see. Yeah, it's a good question. If this simulaVR also supports WebXR. It's.
I think I asked them a couple of months ago, and I think obviously not against it. It was not their priority, but maybe it changed things. Like you see on the number 51, they got quite a bit of funding. So maybe some of it was used there. I mean, typically in the XR world, my experience has been Unity first, Unreal second, whatever next, and then WebXR. I don't want to say last, but unless it's company like Google, which business model revolved at least initially around the web, it's rarely a top priority. Like next to me, I have what is it again? I have so much hardware. A headset where you put on Tilt 5. Well, sorry. The glasses that you put on your head and then you look at a kind of semi-reflect or reflective rather surface, and then basically an augmented reality experience. Mostly for board games, and they've been saying the same, namely like, yes, we understand WebXR, yes, it's cool, but our target market in terms of not even users but developers, it's Unity, just so popular, and so they're not against WebXR, but it's not priority support. So yeah, that is so Lynx. I don't want to market Lynx more than others, but in terms of actual path today, like literally today, to me, it's the one that is the most feasible and pragmatic. The other ones, I wish, and maybe by learning how to build the browser and adapt, like supporting WebXR, there could be a way to adapt to have the same process for other hardware. I don't have the competence for this yet. I would be interested, but not trivial. But yeah, I'm just arguing that that's the most pragmatic for the kind of let's just get to WebXR in a headset, or straight to WebXR in a headset experience we might want.
Yeah, very interesting stuff. I think this is a good. It's good to have this on record, because this conversation and this sort of like playing field you just described is actually also what drove me towards creating XR Fragments, to basically focus on the 3D models, because I was also frustrated to watch for years that if there's a new hardware feature, then it's always like it gets support for Unity first, some kind of asset pack, and then Unreal, and then maybe some upcoming thing which can be different every year. And yeah, that is a bit I don't know. Personally, like, I have nothing against Unreal and Unity, except that they are they are a bit like monstrous, humongous, closed things, and it seems a bit
So
like
you
an
have a lot against them.
yeah, maybe, yeah. I don't really touch them, but I to me it feels a bit like an anti-pattern to have like such a magic black box, you know, building software for or as a starting point. I find that a bit of an anti-pattern, and it feels a bit like every software or when something becomes successful, it always turns into something some monstrosity like that. I don't know why that is, but it seems to happen over and over again
I
until it
think it's money.
becomes so complex that there's a new simplified way of doing things. That seems to be the pattern.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which is actually so. Yeah. So two quick things. One is the building on top of a magical black box. I hear you, and it. That's also what was a nice point about building Volvic and Gecko. So Firefox, let's say, yesterday or 2 days ago, was that it's kind of a little bit like this for the browser. Like I can't do WebXR without the browser, but I've never built a browser, which is also why I started to read the browser book. I don't know if I mentioned this before, maybe. So I'll put it in the chat, but there is a book on how to build a browser, basically. Let's say a play browser, not like Chromium or Gecko or Servo. But I think in terms of understanding the browser itself, that's quite interesting. I still haven't done it. I want to, but it's not in my priority list. But anyway, building Volvic kind of made me feel like less building on top of a black box. Like Chromium or Firefox are not black box; they are open source. But I've always used builds, like releases. Now I'm like, oh, if I want to change something, I have no idea how. I have to be honest. I don't ever know if I technically have the knowledge for that, but I'm confident that were I to want to do that. So, for example, to be very pragmatic, if we want to boot to XRSH on the Lynx, I'm pretty sure Volvic maybe does allow it, but maybe my bet is it allows us without straight being into immersive mode. So I imagine that you boot to it, and then you still have like the 2D interface of the Volvic browser.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe there is a way to force that by
Uh-huh.
changing Volvic, so doing a patch or modifying it. And now I feel like, okay, I don't know how, but I can try to do that. And that is quite empowering, basically.
Well, respect, because exactly like you know, this use case which you're describing right now is, I think, I forgot his name, but there was also like the WebAverse. There was this WebAverse guy. He also came up with a browser, and then
There.
yes, and I think at
Yeah.
some point, like he also added some fixes, but it was a desktop, if I remember correct, a desktop browser, and at some point it became very hard for him to maintain this browser. I also remember the AFRAME maintainer saying that, you know, they had this super medium browser, I think, and he said like, well, to maintain a browser is pretty heavy. And so basically what I wanted to say, they both stopped at some point their browser. So I'm just thinking out loud that you know, how to prevent you from burning out as well, because right now you are in this burst of energy mode, which is great, which is the best part. And I wonder if I wonder if just like if you get one build right, then probably you don't have to rebuild it all the time with the latest features. I mean, there's not so much. If you can reproduce the
Normally it's
build, if
incremental. Yes, yes.
you can reproduce the build with the script, then yeah, I wonder what kind of maintenance they were talking about.
Well,
Not.
so right now, for example, to give you the example of Wolvic, the main work is switching the engine. So giving up on Gecko and switching to Chromium. And yeah, that's not maintenance anymore. It's like re-architecturing the whole solution. I have no idea. Maybe it's just a couple of bindings or changing some function name, and it's instead of like MoseKit this is WebKit that, and I don't know what. But I imagine it goes quite a bit deeper. So I don't think it's easy. I think if you have this kind of big refactoring or architectural change, then it's you're not just in maintenance mode. But otherwise, yes, I think if you have a working build, you keep your build setup, and you want to change a thing or really a thing or two there, probably even takes like 5 minutes. The whole build. Normally, the build system is incremental, so it's relatively fast. It's if you have also assigned your things, you can maybe even push to what's the name, like to the FDroid store. Maybe they have an updates on the device when you boot if you want. I mean, we start to have as an open source ecosystem like good solutions in place. So I think it can be relatively easy to maintain, but then it means also if you start to change the engine itself, then it's not in JavaScript anymore. Maybe it's in Rust, maybe it's in C++, maybe it's another language dedicated to specifically whatever engine that is. So it would take a bit of effort, but I think it's because I would argue it's a little bit like learning the command line, like Bash and scripting and whatnot. It sounds silly, but then it sounded silly also 20 years ago, and then it's still relevant today. Like if you buy even like the Vision Pro, I don't know, but the Oculus Quest 3, if you want to do something a little bit deep, then you need to use ADB, which is
Right.
basically the command line, and then you start to do LS and whatnot. And I think as long as we believe that the web still remains a core component of the internet, then investing time on how to change a browser itself would still be relevant in 20 years. So even though it's a big effort, I admit, when you mentioned also AVR and the WebAverse project, to be honest, linked with the crypto, I don't like so much. But in terms of his technical effort and his vision to say, hey, we want to make not a WebXR browser, but an XR browser that is 3D first. We don't need all the heaviness of CSS, for example, and all that. So we can make the browser itself much, much smaller. We don't even need HTML. So, like, again, it removes so much from it. That was a brilliant idea, and he executed. He actually delivered a browser like this. So his exokit was really brilliant. And yeah, to see somebody like this, like random dude building a browser, I was like, wow, that's next level. So here it's not at all suggesting this, even though again it's inspiring. It's more like, okay, if that is feasible, adapting or patching or tinkering with the browser itself, the ones that are open source and here with a proven way to build it works well, I think we can allow ourselves to maybe be a little bit crazier or try to adapt this for our own goals. But again, this is me being a bit naive about it. But I think, yeah, feasible.
Yeah, that's a good point. If you at some point have some kind of script, broken or working or not, of such a Wolvic build, I would actually be interested because it also has the benefit of basically being able to to demo an idea, an innovative idea, because many times we are daydreaming, or I'm not we, sorry, people are daydreaming about, oh, what if we could have this feature in the browser or that feature, and then they write a spec, but there's no demo. And you know, the best would be to write a spec of a feature and also have a demo, and it would be the best place. This browser would be the best place to be able to demo such a feature. I think it's a really yeah. I think it's. I think I would also like to try some build, actually, because I also have an idea. I was thinking, for example, like, what if the browser could just support a GLTF natively? So if you just write a GLTF file in the URL bar, then it would just render it, perhaps with a immersive button as well. Like, these kind of crazy ideas are easy to write down, but the best would be to sort of like implement it in a browser and show it. So yeah, it's very interesting.
I'm not sure if in that context it's it might be feasible to try that specific ID with because it's something actually I need to. Did you ever develop a web extension?
Yes.
Okay. So that's also one way to get a little bit more privilege in the browser and to do things that are not normally possible. My own example, a couple of years ago, it's 8 years ago actually, was this browsing files from your local file system immersively. And normally you can't have access to the files from a web page, like to the local file system. Now you can. There are ways to do it, but then that was not possible. So all this to say, why also do I mention it is because it's done in JavaScript. So something we're both more familiar with. So maybe there, instead of displaying the file system, you would access the GLB or GLTF file on the local file system, or not local even. And you would display it using, our usual AFRAME or 3GS or whatever viewer for it. And that could also means, for example, if you control the viewer, fragment or whatever extension of GLTF, or a little tinkering I did a few weeks ago on executing code inside the GLTF.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one. That was very cool.
I forgot where it is. So yeah, this such an in-browser GLTF file viewer should be able to support. So anyway, point is, yes, definitely exciting to be able to do it straight from the browser. For both of us now who are not expert in the browser itself in terms of its engine, maybe just quote unquote an extension could be enough.
Yeah, I would like to conclude this with, on one hand, it's a monkey flying an airplane. On the other hand, it's a great time to be able to be a monkey and be able to fly an airplane.
Yes, and I think as a monkey with clothes on, okay, the little anecdote, I'm working on a project for Mozilla Hubs, because to deploy it on OVH, to deploy Mozilla Hubs Community Edition on OVH. And I was literally the monkey trying to fly in the airplane at the beginning of the project. I discussed with them, telling them, I don't know Kubernetes.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, it's not that hard. I'm like, well, it looks like it's pretty complex. I know a little bit of Docker and I have the basics for DevOps, but it's not my job. And they're like, yeah, it's okay. We discussed a bit. And when I started, it was exciting for me because it's the kind of project that is both meaningful and technically challenging. Well, I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. Like, I don't have the competency for this. and I can, and I recorded a couple of videos on how to do it and wrote a little tutorial, and now I can say it's not that hard. So once the monkey knows how to fly the plane, it becomes trivial. It's become like really second nature. But what's the only way to do it is to do it. That's the only way to not be. So I think, yeah, it initially it sounds so crazy, it's silly, and yet once you've done it, it sounds so easy. It was crazy not to do it. So I think here, and again, with a time frame that, okay, if you tell me, okay, you need to change the or rebuild the version of Firefox Reality for the Vision Pro, for example, or whatever, I'm like, no way. But if you tell me it's for 5 years, I'm like, oh, okay, that's feasible. You tell me it's 5 years, I would say maybe I'm quite confident. And if you tell me it's for in 20 years with no urgency, and even if you don't manage, steps down the way are going to help you in other projects, I'm like, it sounds like a worthy endeavor.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I totally agree. How about we go to the next, because we only had the first 3 points. Let's go to the next point. Yeah, this is a quick one. This might be something interesting for well, not only XR Shell but also other programs. I have been working with XR fragments on a milestone concerning metadata, which is basically helping solve accessibility and informational issues. And I came down, I researched, and of course there's already so much descriptive data formats out there, like Dublin Core, Open Graph, and BibTeX, which Frode is using at the Future of Text. So what I basically did, I created a sort of like a meta spec, which is a spec which involves other specs. And I basically decided not to come up with my own metadata format to sort of scan for in the 3D objects. But I basically decided to let me see, where is it? Yeah, I basically decided to encourage adding these things like Aria, SPDX, Open Graph, Dublin Core, and BibTeX in your 3D scenes, because then I'll show it to you. Then you can have like if you click on things, then in XR fragments in AFRAME, I'm basically displaying like a small pop-up. But if they have more metadata, not only href, like this portal, then you can basically see that metadata rendered here, and it also allows a transcript. So these I added some area labels to the 3D objects, and these area labels, they basically allow you to generate a small transcript. I will show it to you here. It might be a bit technical, but it's still interesting to think about. Let me quickly get the So here I have a scene. This is a basically an A-frame scene.
I'm not seeing your screen, huh?
Oh, you're not seeing my screen. Oh, oh shit. Oh man, that must have been a pain to listen to me, because I was showing all kinds of things.
I was listening. I thought this is very conceptual, but I'm trying to put it on. But when you say I have this, like, no, something is missing.
Okay, I'm gonna share my entire screen. Oh yeah, so basically area, Dublin Core,
Yep.
Open Graph, they are these
Saw them a bit, so that's why I was able to hang on
established.
it.
Okay, so I have this. This is basically a GLB, but also basically an A-frame scene. And if I, how can I hide this? Hide, yeah. So if I here I have a scene. This is basically an A-frame or 3GS scene. If I traverse this, I'm gonna make it even a little bigger. Traverse all the nodes. Then if these nodes have a area description, then how can I make this a bit more readable? So if they have a description, I'm now just gonna log it, end user data area description. So here you can see sort of the area descriptions of certain objects, and yeah, this is really useful, I think, for things like this. I'm now hovering this. It could also be a click, and now you can basically generate a transcript from this. This is basically a portal, so there is a scene behind it, and you can now read what is the scene about, and if you want to go here, and you can also see all kinds of other Dublin Core or Open Graph data here. And not only is that handy for links, like in this case hrefs, but if, for example, with XR Shell we embed content, like this is an embed, this is an SRC, then you can basically see what is this embedded content, and if it's a subset of a bigger scene, then you can visit that that embedded scene. This is basically that scene. So long story short, this user data field is a very, these user data properties are a very powerful way to communicate to the user, what kind of object is this, and this also perhaps even allows for textual versions of a 3D scene if you think a bit out of the box. So So this was an exploration which I did for XR fragments, but this whole idea of using user data and established metadata, descriptive metadata formats could be a nice thing to also encourage in XR shell applications as well. So that's my small thing there.
No, but it's great. It makes sense, and in terms of anything that can help accessibility, both to humans and to computers, helps.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not exactly the same, but one of my in GXR I have this little code snippet, and what I used, I noticed when I give workshops to kids, they don't necessarily, some of them speak English, but others don't. So what was very useful is to have time name then as a complete annotation, which was then a translation basically, or either I was describing what the command would do, or in terms of description, then I was using a translation in French, because for this workshop with kids, a lot of them were speaking French more than English. So I kept the code because otherwise it doesn't run, but having some annotation, and I'm wondering if indeed using maybe in addition or instead of an annotation, it would directly be an area description would be better. But is there, do you know if it's possible in the area description to specify, for example, a language?
It's funny. I'm just writing it down because there probably is. I haven't researched it, but you gave me this idea like, oh, this is really cool. Then you can just create your scene in one language, and then you just add the descriptive metadata to sort of support other languages as well. Yeah, I will. I'm gonna research this, but it definitely sounds like a very cool use case. Oh yeah, to sort of like speed up time a bit, the state of Godot, I have been, I'm dabbling a bit with Godot because I saw that in the Godot V4, there is a new support for XR, and I'm not going to go very. I'm not going into big details here, but there is an interesting sort of package. And for the people who just heard me say that I don't like Unity and Unreal because they are black boxes, I think Godot is an interesting use case of completely open source box like Unity or Unreal. But anyways, what is interesting is that there is I cannot really read it here, but this package is a sort of asset. If you use these assets, then if you compile it to WebXR or to OpenXR, then it basically uses the same primitives. So you don't have to optimize it for WebXR or optimize it for OpenXR or have two separate applications. This is sort of XR starting point, which is a bit of a game changer, because before this, if I'm correct, you had to create either a WebXR project in Godot or an OpenXR project in Godot. So the news here is that Godot might also become an interesting starting point for a sort of cross XR application development. So you're not having the sort of like the HTML approach here as a starting point, but still you could develop JavaScript inside a Godot project as well. So that's just an interesting thing, what I've noticed with Godot. Have you ever used it, or?
No, it's been on my to-do list for a little while now, precisely because indeed I understand that some people, despite not liking Unity and the Unreal Engine, do like this kind of game engines, because indeed when you start like a WebXR page and you start with HTML-like and you come from the game engine world, you're like, what is this? Like, that's not how you develop a game, and that's not the way you're used to. And you usually start, I don't know, like defining what the player is or the world is. Like, it's very different mindset. And if it's not just a mindset, like it comes from a design pattern that in the industry works, basically. So it's perfectly understandable. Some of it, for example, through ECS, has been adapted, and AFRAME does try to stick to this kind of things. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I understand that for some people they prefer such an engine, and Godot answers a lot of those concerns. It's open source. It does get WebXR. I mean, it's really a great example. So I've been wanting to explore it a bit, but then every time, like, what's the actual advantage I would gain versus WebXR page? Because also I'm not a developer.
Way too many.
I became it a little bit due to WebXR because it just worked. Like, you can make game once you know how to make a basic WebXR.
Right. I totally agree. I also have to admit that I don't use Godot because it has a build step, and once you start to realize the benefits of not having a build step like with HTML and JavaScript. It's a bit hard to go back to Go dots. However, for if somebody is watching this video, there is a really good video of getting started with OpenXR in Godot 4.x, which also uses the same tools to export a WebXR one. But yeah, as a sort of promo for AFRAME, if you haven't done any XR development, I would definitely go for AFRAME because, yeah, not having to build it and just being able to, inject some extra JavaScript code is so much easy. It's so much easier, especially when you get a phone call that something is not working, than being able to just enter some extra text and fix the bug. Is great without having to build it and upload it to some kind of app store or whatever. There's it's a bit of a trade-off. Okay, now the thoughts on Gesture Manager.
Well, the thought was basically I need to build it. I'd forgot what triggered it. I think it was tinkering with gestures on the Apple Vision Pro, which is basically eye tracking plus pinch. And I was thinking it's something people are not yet familiar with. It's not like you don't have an option to enable it, change it, etc. It just is like it's the basic new affordance on the OS. So I was pondering about it and what it should look like. But yeah, so right now in terms of workload, because of hubs, it's I finished the hubs project on the 14th, so in 2 weeks, something like this. Yeah, and then I will have time to explore this kind of thing. So it's still very much active on the back of my mind, but not in terms of reloading the code base and tinkering and whatnot. But yeah, it's definitely a need, and the Lynx also was a great example. Is like now that I can't use hand tracking proper, I need to use controller. If I had a gesture manager, this action would be decoupled from that gesture. They would be coupled, let's say, but loosely or at least explicitly. Here it's just like code spaghetti mess. It's just how it is. It works, but then when I need the flexibility rather of saying, hey, I don't have control, or hence I have controllers, I don't want to rewrite the code. I want the gesture manager to say, no problem. We fall back or we switch, or even the user explicitly goes from this input mode to another. So yeah, it's just there is an actual need for it, is my point.
You also wrote that assigning a gesture to an object as an action, switching to another object, switching to another action, then generalizing for XR shell and thus how to interface.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just a couple of sentences, but it's a huge huge topic. It's not a small thing.
No, it's not. I think, and I think it's some of the most interesting topic at the moment. Like while we tinker with the different headsets, I have 3 on my desk now, different controllers, different inputs. People just started to learn how to interact with hands on the Oculus devices, and now the Vision Pro is like, nope, that's not how we do it. So it feels like we're entering that phase where there is a whole vocabulary of gestures in immersive, not just web, but in the XR in general. And I think if we don't want to get stuck one way or another, because we're still exploring it, and also we have different in terms of accessibility, we all have different needs. So yeah. I think it is a big topic.
Yeah, I also have some thoughts on it, on why it's important, because I'm realizing that almost every feature I'm trying to I'm trying to implement, like very quickly, it already touches on gestures. For example, like it, in this, I will. Am I sharing my screen? Yeah. In this world, um, you would say like, well, you can just make. You don't have to worry about hand tracking, or you can do it as an afterthought. But even for something simple like showing this mouse over. Oh, sorry, I like a mouse over on 2D is easy, but once you start thinking about how to show this in VR, and again, you still at this moment you think this has nothing to do with gestures, but the moment like I started to think like how to show this in VR, then I just I have a memory of no, not this one, of like the Terminator 2 HUD, that you basically see some text in front of you, and this turns out to be completely great in Hollywood movies, but completely annoying in
Right.
VR. So I was then thinking like how where should I show it then? Should I show it on my wrists? And if I don't want to show it on my wrist or somewhere else, how should I put it somewhere else? And well, it's a bit of a rabbit hole, and I realized that it's very easy to implement something hard coded, which becomes very annoying. So there has to come some kind of uniform interface to lay out extra information about your scene in a very flexible way, which works for controllers, but also for hand controllers. And so, oh man, this is. I decided to not show it in VR actually because I wasn't confident about doing anything sensible. So yeah, this gesture manager, and this is basically my question. Like, are you also thinking about, or should we also think about, how it correlates with controllers? Because like in WebXR, it seems to be two different things. You have controllers and you have hand controllers. And, can controllers also do a gesture, or what are your thoughts on that?
So the point of that long sentence also in the agenda was like, I don't want to think too much, and I want to do it shitty at first, but I want it to be instantiated to exist and then iterate.
Yeah.
Because I think otherwise it's like generalizing too fast and then having something that doesn't actually do anything. So I prefer to, for example, use the Lynx emulated hands or controllers as emulated hands, or rather hands as emulated controllers, sorry. And then hands whenever they're ready, as an excuse to do it, and then generalize it. Because again, I think there are so many things that can be done. And I think at first, if it looks like a single list of, on one side, a gesture, basic one, let's say pinch or right hand pinch, even on a single target, which is like red cube with ID 123. Just that. So that sounds like pointless nearly. And then in that list, you can switch that target to the blue cube. And then on the left, you can switch the gesture from right pinch to left pinch. So again, super basic. But then if you can do this in XR, and then you can start from there to generalize more. And indeed, like, is clicking on the controller gesture, is doing a circle with the controller, the gesture, is it something that should be reproducible with the hands? I'm rather confident that all this is going to just fall through. It's going to work by usage. But yes, that single thing, the list of items that you bind together, that's what I want to use as a starting point. And I don't want to go too deep too fast, because otherwise it's like over-specifying for an exciting implementation that might be pointless or useless.
Well, you gave me a great insight that sometimes doing something as an afterthought is actually the way to get things done. Because you're right, if we worry about all these use cases and we summarize what do we want, and then we could completely burn out before we have anything working. So yeah, I like this. Let's go for quick results which are exciting, and then optimize from there instead of premature optimizing a solution which might even be a terrible experience. Who knows? I have two micro questions. One, is there currently a very easy way in AFRAME to support hand controls which also allow you to teleport? And the second question is,
The first answer is yes.
Yes and yes?
There are components to teleport, and they are easy. Are they maintained? Are they the one kind of teleportation you want? And maybe most importantly, are they going to overwrite the other kind of interactions you want? For example, maybe you use right hand pinch and you already have this binded. Then that's an unknown. I can't say.
And are those native to AFRAME? Like, is it like built-in components, or are they somewhere in a repository?
I think it's like community maintained, like on C-Frame, or I
Okay.
forgot there were a couple from a former Mozilla staff that switched to Apple. Fernando, I think,
Oh,
had
yeah.
a teleport component.
And but that
I
is like hand gesture teleport?
can't remember because it's been a little while. So
Okay.
and
Yeah, because I'm right now I have in my basically in the in the XR shell template now there is 0 hand control, and I'm not really sure what is like a good temporary go-to solution before we have so we can sort of like teleport or click something, which is I guess the basics. And yeah, so I'm not really sure what to sort of like use temporarily, and I have the same problem with XR fragments. Like, I don't really know. I have controller support, but I don't have hand control support. I'm not really sure what to use to teleport or click things for the time being. But yeah, we can research that.
it's not easy because it's like it's a whole indeed in terms of, for example, adding a new gesture that executes something, let's say teleporting. You don't want it to, I'm not sure what's the right way to say it, but to shadow some other functions you were using.
Right.
So here, again, I'm sure you'll find components that do what you want, but will it be something that's easier to rewrite yourself because the integration is going to break so much the rest? This I have absolutely no idea, and it's really a per project thing. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, it almost feels like this confirms the need for a gesture manager, because yeah, whatever you're gonna build, you want to be flexible, and this is what the gesture manager could help with.
Yes, it would help there. It wouldn't be sufficient though, in the sense that, for example, you could list a couple of community-made components that are compatible with it. It would be important to clarify what makes them compatible or incompatible, because otherwise, okay, if the list has explicit components that are supported, that's great. But then if not, why not? So that either they can be adapted or understood, and but it would be great indeed that, let's say, if there are components that can be directly used in a gesture manager, how to ensure you don't, because it's a typical problem actually on I have the KDE custom shortcuts window open on my desktop right now. And if you start to define a command to do something, for example, I have a shortcut to kill any window, and when I do it, I'm like, okay, what's the actual shortcut? I don't know if you have this experience, but my experience is like, which other application running is going to intercept it and maybe make a big mess?
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean. I also have these overlapping shortcuts happening to me.
So yeah, that's in my opinion a big question. That's why I was saying like overshadowing or whatnot. Again, I don't know what's the right term for it. Here it's more in terms of programming than the UI, but it's very important. Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot. Sorry to bother you with the last question because you're very into hands and stuff. I noticed this Ada Rose Cannon is using this handiwork in her work. Have you used it, and do you know what it does and what it does not do?
So I did use it. Basically, if I remember correctly, she did a little bit of machine learning to not explicitly define a pose, like the position of a hand and a rotation, but rather train it. So she logged all the data that she needed, and then she used a model. She trained a model to recognize that pose. So it gives a little bit of flexibility. And then the component itself basically infer the current pose from the one that she's trained to say, hey, that person is doing that gesture, like opening hand or whatever, and then can do whatever then you want after once it's been detected. So instead of, let's say, explicitly saying, hey, my thumb are close enough together to say it does this action, or the hand is open by saying it has all the joints a certain way, she relied on machine learning to get like a more flexible version. That's my understanding of it.
Interesting. Okay, so this is only one part of the puzzle. And this is something different than this library of gestures you have sort of mentioned earlier. That it was a library with like a lot of like open gestures or something.
I don't remember, unfortunately.
Yeah, you showed me a website with like an enormous library of gestures.
Yes, I think so. Yeah. So no, the other, if I microglyph, do you mean?
Yeah, those ones.
Okay. So this one is only, so this one it's code. The thing that Ada has done, well, it's actually mostly statistical data about gestures, and then the code to be able to use them. Microglyph is the description or the language. I think it's uglyph, micro as in U. No. Yeah. I think it's this, and maybe research or
obscene.
Nope.
Research XR.
Okay,
this
let
one.
me try. Yes. I mean, they have another dedicated website, but yes, the micro gesture notation. So it is indeed just a notation. It's a way to describe it. So for example, what ADA does is saying open hand detected, and this notation is like, how can you write up the 5 fingers, etc. So this has no implementation. It is just those little symbols you see on the right. Like there is no code. I mean, no code, but it's not that you would use in your application typically.
And is this like, are these like ASCII characters or?
Good question. I don't remember. I hope that they didn't do something crazy, but they might provide a library to read a web-based library to read and write or interpret glyphs. So
So these glyphs might become incorporated into their own. So you have like UTF-8, which has glyphs, and I'm now thinking how this would fit into this whole, like I'm wondering what this glyph notation is used for. Is it to
So let's imagine that you write or you write the documentation for XRSH, and you want somebody who's never used it to use it, and you do a certain gesture, let's say left hand pinch between the thumb and the index. You could tell them that left hand pinch with the thumb and index. If they've done it before, chances are they're able to do it. If they have not done it before, chances, unless you show them, might be difficult. And the result of that research is that the actual description of a gesture is often misunderstood.
Aha.
And thus, they're suggesting that a notation, there or another, but there's, they imagine, is the one that is covering the most, getting too complex, helps remove any kind of ambiguity.
Ah, okay. That's cool. It's basically
Honestly, I think it's let's say a long-term endeavor. Like I know people are going to read manual of the Apple Vision Pro with the microglyph notation, and we're like, oh, okay, I do this thing and that thing. But my bet is that as we, as a society, start to use XR more and use gesture more, we're going to say, okay, we know the right hand, left hand pitch, and it's cool. But indeed, now we start to be a bit more dexterous and intellectually savvy. We can remember more than two gestures. And we can pinch with the other fingers, and suddenly we can start to type, we can start to grab with a lot more efficiency. And then people want to actually use VR rather than feel like it's a quirky thing, because it can actually start here in terms of word per minute or whatever the KPI is, the metric is, with like a traditional keyboard, let's say. But it's going to be, in my opinion, a little bit of a trade-off, that people are not going to want to remember 20 kind of new gestures until it's been proven or they have experienced like a radical gain in efficiency. Like nobody wants to use a keyboard at first. They just want to write or sketch. And then like, whoa, actually I can do it faster, or I can do shortcuts, or I can learn VI shortcuts to do regex on my regular expression on my text and on my code. So that's my personal bet, let's say, that right now it looks overkill. And if you just do left hand or whatever hands pinching, it is overkill. But as I bet we're going to gain like gestures are going to gain momentum, then it will start to be important. How do you describe a gesture?
Yeah, it makes sense. And of course, in the beginning, it's always overkill, or it seems always overkill. But yeah, it's very interesting. It also reminds me of how, things change inevitably. Like we started with smileys in text, now they became emoticons and you have all these new symbols and things being added to our life, basically, as they are used more and more and more. So
And
yeah,
indeed, initially they are a little bit. They look like silly, and most people don't adopt them, and then they are getting gradually adopted, and then they grow in terms of size as also usage grows. So yeah, it's indeed a good analogy.
very interesting. Now, I think we have another one, the Hubs CE documentation and broader federation with Immers. How Hubs custom components could leave or live or leave in a C-frame or elsewhere.
Indeed, leave the other one. So I also tell you like, well, we completely blow the time, so let's just go way over and let's finish it. So okay, let's do this then. No problem. The idea there is, sadly, because Mozilla gave up Hubs, Hubs is dead from Firefox Mozilla viewpoint. But Hubs has some interesting components. Actually, that's, I think, why a lot of people use Hubs rather than networked A-frame with A-frame components. It's like there are components to scale a 3D model. You pinch on both hands, component to rotate a model when you pinch, some of the stuff that I ended re-implementing myself. Stuff like uploading a PDF and then the backend is going to store it, converts to images, blah, blah, blah. But now that Hubs is dead, or sunset, but sorry, I'm being a bit harsh, there will be an attempt by the community to own it and govern it and maintain it. And I'm wondering how that can be done. And some of it might be that the components, the frame-based components of Hubs should live outside of Hubs because they could be benefited from other applications that would thus have a bigger incentive to maintain them. And one way to do this is the C-frame or the community A-frame components. And voilà, I briefly mentioned it to Vincent Fretin, who works on C-frame and on network A-frame. He gave a couple of comments on Discord, but it also goes back to one of our earliest discussion about the benefit of A-frame components, community maintained components, registry of components. Yeah,
you're right. There is a lot of amazing high quality components in Hubs, which are actually A-frame components. So it would really benefit A-frame and the A-frame community if those could also be used outside of Hubs. A lot of work went into a lot of those components, and I don't know how. I guess maybe it's a bit of an impossible question, but I also wonder how much these components are interweaved with the Hub's server, and to which degree they can be sort of used in a networked A-frame environment, or even without networked A-frame. But it's I guess we have to look at that at a component base, per component basis, I guess.
Yes.
Okay,
And there might be also better alternatives already out there. I'm not sure. And maybe it's the other way around, like some of the components of Hubs should be discarded and replaced by a community maintained version that is already better. I'm not sure. But yeah, this is going to be some hard technical and social tree shaking, like things are going to move there. Otherwise, Hubs basically will be I mean, regardless, yeah, that's going to shake.
Do you know which version of A-frame your Kubernetes Hubs adventure was running?
No, I don't know. And let me check if I have it still running, but I think I deleted the clusters yesterday evening. No, yeah, I don't have it running. Though it doesn't really, it's not that it doesn't matter, but the last part of the tutorial, I'll also put that in the chat actually, is I made a video about, so well, I put it there. I made a video about using Hub's Cloud. So the front end, I should make an anchor for this, but how to make your own front end for Hub's Cloud Community Edition. And thus, if you want to switch to bit ECS, if you want to switch to AFRAME 1.5, if you want to change something on the front end of Hubs, it is decoupled enough that you can do this. It's something that I wanted to initially do more, because my point as a prototypist is not to show you Hubs Community Edition, is to show you Hubs Community Edition with a new component, for example, some integration with electronics or IoT, or passkey authentication with another backend, whatever. It's not to show you verbatim Hubs, because that's not my idea. But the rush of the sunset made me release this. But basically, if you deploy Hubs Community Edition on the Kubernetes configuration, the YAML file, you're going to say, I want Hubs Cloud, the front end, to be pulled from this Docker repository. Instead of using the Mozilla Reality, the repository, you can use your own Docker repository, and then it's going to take your image, and then you can say, hey, I want another front end, or I want this or that version of AFRAME. So that would be the right way, let's say, to customize the Hubs front end and eventually change the AFRAME version.
That's very, very cool. You're sort of unbundling the solution into smaller parts and showing how to prototype with those individual parts.
Yes. Well, that's one of the key design pattern, let's say, of prototyping or process step, is like, if you take the whole any project as a whole, it's too complex. But chances are the modification you want to do, if you can have a part that is not strongly coupled with the rest, you just modify that part, just that tiny piece, and then you can backtrack from there if you want deeper customization. But at the very beginning, just a small part as shallow as possible, so that's much safer. And then, as you're in understanding of the bigger picture, the whole architecture of the project, then you can modify more parts or go deeper, closer to the core. But I think overall, when you prototype, that's a healthy process, I would argue.
Yeah, it also reminds me about how this conversation started with the monkey and the airplane. That, you know, after the first flight or the first build, you can see the individual parts, the engine, the luggage room, the cockpit, and all these things. You can tell them apart, and suddenly the whole thing becomes manageable, and you're no longer a monkey anymore.
Yes. Yeah. And if we stick to that analogy of the monkey in the plane, when you do your first modification on the plane, change the color of the seat. Don't change the engine itself. Don't change the fuel. Start with something that sounds or looks too small to even make a difference, that you feel a little bit silly. But just by doing this, you're going to learn that, no, for example, the color of the seats, maybe it's a non-toxic one, because when you are a certain altitude, the pressure change, and thus you shouldn't do this. And maybe it's going to have like small bad impact, but at least you're going to survive. If you start with the engine, like, well, it's your last flight as a monkey.
Exactly. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, that's a good idea. I think after this call, I'm also gonna try to look at Wolvic and see if I can change if I can manage to build it and I can manage to change a little color somewhere, then that would give a huge confidence boost.
I'm going to check a quick thing for you for Wolvic. Because you don't have Lynx, so you can build it for what's the name, for Oculus, for the Quest. But it might need some third-party files, and I don't know if it needs like some special file that only Oculus gives to Igalia or to a special, like how do you say, vendors or whatnot.
Even for a debug build, you think it might?
No, but so you need access to the SDK. But I think if you can have the Oculus SDK, that would work. And at worst, if you have an Android phone, or you can use the emulator, that would work. And if you have an Android phone, you can also build that for a phone. Obviously, it's not going to be immersive, but you could still be able to see changes on the device. I imagine.
Didn't know about that. Also,
because there are some specific parts per vendor. I'll put the link there.
Cool.
For the Lynx, I had to put in the third-party repo. I think it's basically, I don't even know, to be honest, like a calibration file for like loader release.r. Yeah, I'm not sure what that was for, but maybe it's for some parameters that only the manufacturers, maybe what's the name, Qualcomm also, for the processing on it. I'm not sure, but my point, sorry, to make it clear, is it's a device specific part of the build, and for the Oculus, you're going to be the one who is going to help me, because I never tried to build Wolvic for the Quest. But of course, in terms of impact, would be interesting, because there are more people with a Quest than a Lynx for now, probably forever.
Well, let's keep this optimism. I think it might be like you said, a good investment for the future to do these kind of things.
Definitely. And again, second rule about prototyping, besides changing the seats rather than the engine, is it doesn't have to work to be useful. So as long as you have learned something, no matter how small the step, I don't even remember. I probably tried to build Wolvic like 6 months ago, or whenever, actually, because I made an issue for the Lynx, because so let me just check for complete honesty. I complained about tracking or whatnot. Wasn't me actually on this one. Closed issue. Yes, input profile. So I complained about this in November. And so I probably tried to build Wolvic in November, and it did not work. I did not manage, rather. So my point is, it doesn't matter if it managed or not. Like, I learned something back then, I wrote it down. I'm trying again now, I wrote it down. Hence the point of the wiki with the notes. So as long as you learn, even if the final outcome is not there, it's still useful. Again, thinking a bit more long-term than an instant reward successful build. So yeah, I suggest, in terms of prototyping, not getting too attached to the outcome, only to the learning process, because it's harsh otherwise. It's really challenging.
Yeah, that's a good tip. It's a good tip not to burn out on a certain problem. All right, so I think we overblew our time quite spectacularly, which is, I think, also a good sign that we have a lot of things to discuss.
It was my pleasure.
I think, yeah, I'm gonna have a look at these links which you have posted, and I'm also gonna try to perhaps shoehorn an extra links in the yeah, as a sort of a requirement. Maybe we can get an extra testing device, and then we can yeah, both make some progress on non-Meta and non-Apple devices as well.
Yes. I think it's just knowing that it exists in terms of long-term investment of learning and skills. It feels empowering because we don't feel trapped in locked ecosystem, and it's a risky adventure because those are not cheap devices, and the support might dwindle, and maybe Lynx doesn't exist next year. I genuinely hope that they will, but I don't know for sure. But in the meantime, to see, hey, there are generally open alternatives where we can both keep on tinkering and also don't feel like we're trapped into a technological prison, but can be free to tinker and learn, and also just use this quality immersive content with respect to privacy. I believe it's important and worth the resources.
Mm-hmm. And a quick question: should we suggest if we could get an extra device, should we get a simulaVR or a Lynx? What do you think?
I would, well, assuming that we see a clear path to WebXR on the Simula, I would suggest the Simula because, yeah, I already have links. We can swap them also by post or if we meet. So it's feasible and it gives a bit more diversity. So I would say rather Simula. But if there is no path to WebXR from Simula,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't feel that we could be the one helping with that, then maybe quote unquote just a Lynx would be enough.
Uh-huh.
That would be
Okay.
my suggestion.
I'm gonna do a bit of research on that as well. All right. I think I'm gonna eat something right now. Have a lunch and then do a dog walk.
It sounds great. Bon appetit then. Enjoy the walk and chat soon.
Yeah, let's keep in touch and yeah, see you soon.
Take care. Bye bye.
All right. Cheers. Bye bye.